My boss fired me in the middle of the forest, and it cost him way more than he thought. Back in the late 80s, I landed what I thought was one of the best jobs a 19-year-old could ask for. I got hired by the Ministry of Natural Resources to drive and support forest fire crews. It paid just over double minimum wage, which felt like a fortune at that age, and the hours were unlimited. The more fires that broke out, the more money I could make. By mid-May, I was already working long days supporting a massive fire, several hundred hectares in size. The district I worked in covered an area roughly the size of Indiana, so there was endless driving involved, often on terrible logging roads. One afternoon, I was told to head over to the helicopter staging area to pick up the fire boss and a few others. The road was rough, filled with potholes and ruts, but I took it slow. Halfway back, I hit a deep pothole. The truck jolted hard, and the fire boss completely lost it. He exploded, yelling about goddamn kids speeding, and accused me of having no respect. For the entire ride back, which only lasted about 5 minutes, he bellowed in my ear. When we finally rolled into camp, he slammed the truck door open, stomped out, and roared, "You're fired! Get back to district and process out." That meant I had to drive all the way back to headquarters on my own. We were deep in the bush, and it had taken me nearly 7 hours just to get to that fire in the first place. But if I was fired for going too fast at 15 kilometers per hour, then fine. I'd show him what slow really looked like. So I grabbed 2 20-liter gas cans, set the truck in gear, and let it idle the whole way out. No acceleration, unless gravity forced me to touch the brakes on a hill. Otherwise, I crawled at the speed of a snail. It took me 22 hours just to reach a paved road. After that, I set the cruise control 5 kilometers below the speed limit and rolled my way back to district. When I finally got there, I processed my termination and walked out with an extra $300 in overtime. As I was leaving, I ran into one of the crew bosses I knew from the training course. He was short a firefighter because one of his guys had broken a leg, and he needed a replacement immediately. Within 2 hours, I was rehired, not as a driver this time, but as a full-fledged member of his fire crew. A few days later, we got dispatched to a new fire. And wouldn't you know it, it was the exact same fire I had been fired from. Only this time, I wasn't behind the wheel. I was in the helicopter, sitting just a few seats away from the fire boss who had screamed in my face and booted me out of camp. At first, he didn't recognize me, but about a week in, as we lifted off for another run, he turned his head and realized who was sitting behind him. I will never forget what happened next. His face turned pink, then red, then a shade of purple I didn't even think was possible. He started shouting into his headset so loudly that spit flew out of his mouth. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I just sat there with the biggest grin on my face while my new crew boss smirked at me from across the chopper. Later, when I told him the full story, including the 22-hour crawl back to district, he laughed so hard he nearly fell over. Apparently, the fire boss had a long history of exploding over nothing and taking it out on whoever was closest. He had even fired a couple more people after me, probably over the exact same pothole. That was when my new boss decided to have a little fun. From then on, he always made sure I was seated directly behind the fire boss during flights, so every time he glanced over his shoulder, there I was. On another fire, when my crew got assigned to administrative duties, my boss became the fire boss's right-hand man, which meant I got to serve as his so-called helper monkey. My boss even joked that I was his version of Jock Itch, always there, impossible to ignore. It turned into one of the best summers of my life. I got to fight fires, earn great money, and watch the man who tried to ruin my job slowly boil every time he had to see me. I worked 3 more summers after that with the same crew boss, came back to university every fall with wild stories, a decent paycheck, and the kind of tan you only get from living half your life in the bush. But the sweetest part will always be knowing that the boss who thought he'd humiliate me only ended up giving me the most satisfying revenge imaginable by making me his permanent shadow.